This is what happens when the sun dies and Earth starts to freeze. 8 people get sent to space with a bomb the size of Manhattan to blow up the sun and restart the sun to make it shine again. But things go wrong. In the 2007 star-studded movie Sunshine, Cillian Murphy plays Kappa, a nuclear physicist who created a bomb attached to a spaceship called the Icarus II. You might wonder why it's not the Icarus I. Well, that's because the Icarus project sent the Icarus I 7 years earlier to deliver the bomb, but they failed. Now the crew of the Icarus II are charged to carry out the mission for the second time. First, we see Dr. Searle, the crew's therapist, in the observation deck of the Icarus I, where the crew can observe the sun. From their distance, Searle T observes the sun's brightness at just 3%, and it almost kills him. He then tells the group that he enjoyed looking at the sun at such intensity. Michelle Yeoh plays Corey, the botanist, oxygen provider. Chris Evans is Mace, the mechanic. Benedict Wong is Trey, the navigator. Harvey is the communications expert, Cassie is the pilot, and Kaneda is the captain. Over dinner, the captain informs the crew that they're getting to a point in space where communication is impossible, so they should all send their final messages in case they can't return home. So Kappa sends a video message to his parents and sister, and he informs them that if they wake up one morning and the sun is extra bright, then their team is successful. Corey informs the captain at the observation deck that they have enough oxygen to make it to the drop site and back home. Then they talk about Icarus I and what could have made them fail. We then cut to Kappa and Mace fighting, and Mace seems to be a lot more aggressive. Mace goes to Searle and admits he's having a hard time coping with the journey. Searle recommends that he spend time in the simulation room, and that calms him down. He then visits Kappa and apologizes silently. Kaneda then listens to the last transmission from the Icarus I by Captain Pinbacker before their mission fails. We also cut to Mace, who's gotten a haircut working on the cooling engine. The cold almost gives him frostbite. The crew then takes some time out to watch Mercury. Harvey, in his communication room, hears a transmission from the Icarus I. It's a distress beacon, and he tells the rest of the crew. They start debating if they should take their ship off course to go check out the ship, as they manage to pinpoint their location. Mace says Searle suggests that they should visit the Icarus I, just in case their bomb isn't enough. That way, they'll have 2 bombs, and they can be double safe. The captain is indecisive. They ask Kappa to make the final decision since he's the expert in payload delivery. Kappa does the math, and he says a lot of things are still theoretical, so he tells Kaneda that he should check out Icarus I because 2 bombs are better than 1. The captain agrees, and the crew changes their course. Kappa starts having nightmares about being on the surface of the sun. He wakes up to Cassie looking at him as she tells him he made the right decision. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Almost immediately, the ship's alarm started ringing. It turns out Trey managed to turn the ship to the new coordinates, but he didn't reset their shields to a new angle, so it exposed them to direct sunlight, and now their shields are damaged, and for them to fix it, someone has to go out in space. Kaneda volunteers and Mace volunteers Kappa, while Harvey is left in charge. They suit up in their golden spacesuits and head outside, but in order to rotate the shield to the damaged side, they will expose some of their communication towers to the sun, burning them up. Kaneda and Kappa head into space, and when they get to the shields, they notice that only 4 panels were damaged, and they can fix it. So the rest of the crew rejoice, and Trey is revealed because he thought he had doomed them all. As Kappa and Kaneda work on the panels, the burnt comm towers start burning up and rotating, and then one of them crashes into their oxygen garden, causing a fire. Icarus I announces that it's taking the ship back to its original position and resetting the shields, which will expose Kappa and Kaneda to the sun because part of the ship is on fire. Corey starts panicking and tries to put out the fire. Cassie tries to stop Icarus from returning the ship to its original location, but since the payload is in jeopardy, the captain orders Icarus to return to the original location and tries to hurry up his work. Meanwhile, the garden is burning up, and their oxygen supplies are going away. But what's worse is the fire could spread, so Mace orders Icarus to release more oxygen to speed up the flames, which will be bad, but the aftermath will stop the fire. Icarus does that, despite Corey's protest, and the fire reduces. Meanwhile, Kaneda orders Kappa to return to the ship, and he will handle the last repair. Kappa leaves, but as the captain is repairing the ship, the shields realign and the captain is exposed to the sun, and he burns up, but Kappa manages to survive. Thankfully, the shields and payload are secure. Harvey is now the captain of the ship, and Trey feels so bad that he is now at risk of taking his own life, so he is sedated. But there's a promise. Due to the damage to the garden and tanks, they don't have enough oxygen to deliver the bomb to the sun, so they have no choice but to go to the Icarus I and get some oxygen. Corey then informs Cassie and Mace that they will have enough oxygen if 3 people lose their lives and there's just 4 people left. But that sounds rather harsh, so they rendezvous with Icarus I. Kappa visits the bomb room to check on things. It's a big room as big as Manhattan, and there's a bomb ignition chamber. There, Cassie meets Kappa, and she tells him that they are all going to die in this mission, and Kappa says he's prepared as long as he gets to see the explosion. The Icarus II arrives at Icarus I, and they connect their passage tunnels to the ship. Kappa, Searle, Mace, and Harvey gear up to see the ship. When both ships are connected, they open the doors and enter the rundown Icarus I. It's dark, but still has the lights on. There's dust everywhere, and Kappa points out that it's human skin, because 70% of dust consists of human skin. The ship looks abandoned, so they decide to split up to cover more ground. Mace goes to check the flight deck to see if the ship is still flyable, and Kappa checks on the payload. Harvey visits the garden, and he finds plants that have 7 years of unchecked growth, which means they'll have more than enough oxygen. So he jumps into the garden. Mace notices that everything on the ship is working fine except for the flight computer. Then he sees a message from Pinbacker, and he starts spouting nonsense like mankind deserves to die because it's the will of God. The message is from 6 years ago, at the time when Icarus I was supposed to deliver its payload. Kappa checks the payload, and he sees that everything is secure. They have 2 bombs now. But then Mace tells them that the flight component of the cooling system has been sabotaged, which means they can't fly the Icarus I. Hence, they should never have tried to come here in the first place. Searle finds the rest of the Icarus I crew in the observation deck. They burnt themselves with unfiltered sunlight, and they're all gone. As they inspect the bodies, their ship starts to shake. Something has disconnected both ships, and the hull of Icarus I has been damaged, which means they won't be able to return to Icarus II. They start panicking, but Mace then finds a spacesuit and tells Kappa to put on the suit, because he is the only one who can operate the bomb. Everyone seems to agree except Harvey. He thinks that because he's the captain, he's the one who needs to survive, and he orders Kappa to take off the suit, which leads to an argument. Mace gets an idea. If the Icarus II lines their hull precisely to theirs, when they exit the Icarus I, the pressure will propel them forward into the Icarus II, but the only problem is they don't have suits, and there's no oxygen in space, and it's minus 373 degrees C. To put this in perspective, the lowest natural occurring temperature ever recorded on Earth was minus 89.22 degrees C. Space is cold, y'all, but if they time it just right, they'll make it. The other problem is that someone has to manually open the Icarus I doors from the inside, so one of them has to stay behind. Searle decides to stay behind. The ships get lined up, the boys are wrapped up, and the doors get opened, and they get ejected out of the ship. Kappa gets to the Icarus I. He manages to hold on to Mace, but Harvey gets separated from them, so he gets frozen in space. But Kappa and Mace survive. The crew are forced to leave Searle behind, seeing that there's no way that he's going to leave the Icarus I. The rest of them leave. Searle goes to the observation and exposes himself to direct sunlight. The rest of the crew holds a meeting. Mace and Corey tell them that the airlock was damaged by someone manually. That's why they got stuck on the Icarus I. The question is, who did it? Corey and Cassie were piloting, and the rest of the boys were on the Icarus II. The only one who could have done it is Trey. Corey also mentions that with Harvey and Searle gone, they just need to lose one more person, and they will have enough oxygen to deliver the payload. Mace then decides that he is going to end the life of Trey. The dude is a wreck anyway, and he's of no use to anyone. They have a vote. Corey and Kappa agree, and Cassie says she's not going to vote. But the decision is already unanimous, so Mace gets a knife and looks for Trey. Sadly, when he gets there, Trey is already gone. He takes his own life. Mace tells Kappa that this was all his fault, that none of this would have happened if Kappa hadn't made them leave the mission. Then they start fighting again. Kappa then goes back to the bomb room, and he tells Icarus to check the oxygen consumption. Icarus tells him they will not live long enough to deliver the payload. Kappa is like, why? Icarus says there are too many people on board, but Corey says 4 people can make it. Icarus tells him that there are actually 5 people on the ship. Wait, what? Who's on the ship? Kappa asks. Icarus says the person is unknown, and he's in the observation room. Mace goes to the room, and he finds someone blasting themselves with sunlight. It's Pinbacker, the captain of the Icarus I. We don't see his face, but the dude is crazy. He's the one who sabotaged the former airlock system, and he slashes Kappa with a knife. He seems to think that humanity needs to go extinct so he can be the last man alone with God. He chases Kappa, and Kappa runs to the airlock system and locks himself in. Pinbacker then manually locks him in. He goes into the ship and disables the cooling system, which causes the entire ship to lose power, including the Icarus AI. Meanwhile, Corey is checking on the ship's garden that burnt down, and she finds a tiny plant that survived. She's really happy about it, but then she gets stabbed in the back by Pinbacker. So she's gone. Kappa tends to his wounds and tries to leave the airlock, but there's no way. Pinbacker starts hunting Cassie. Mace wakes up and he notices that there's something wrong. He manages to reach Kappa through the comm in the nearby spacesuit, and Kappa tells him what's going on. Mace goes to the engine room and tries to get the ship operational again. Now he has to go into the freezing water to fix things. He manages to get it operational again, but by then, his body is already suffering from the cold. When some of the lights turn on, Cassie stabs Pinbacker and runs away. Mace keeps going into the cold water to fix things, and at one point he tells Calliope that he'll need to find a way out of the airlock and release the payload manually, separating it from the Icarus II and then force it into the sun to detonate it. Mace manages to fix most of the engine, but he gets stuck on his way out and dies. Kappa then puts on the suit and causes an explosion in the airlock, which opens a way into the ship. He goes to the ship controls and sees Mace frozen on the floor. He separates the payload from the Icarus II and turns on the payload rockets, which will allow the payload to fly into the sun. When the ship is detached, Kappa jumps from the Icarus I into the payload compartment, and he almost falls into the surface of the sun, but he makes it in the nick of time. As the payload rocket ignites, the Icarus II gets burnt by the sun. Kappa goes into the compartment as the payload descends into the sun. He enters the big room where the bomb is, and he finds Cassie. As he talks to her, Pinbacker holds him up and tries to end him, but he and Cassie fight the man, and they end up ripping his arm and falling down. They get up, and Kappa runs to the ignition room. There, he gets the ignition key and starts the process. The sparks start forming, and an explosion occurs. Kappa watches in the middle of the sun as the sparks and explosions start to react, which is what he wants. Then we go to a frozen Earth, where Kappa's sister is looking at the message he sent, and suddenly the sun starts to shine brightly. They succeeded. End of movie.